can find my doppelganger in the world, that consultant org psychologist who's out in the world seemingly living a better life than me. Now, we know it's not true, but that causes us all to have just a little bit of FOMO, which unlocks us from the deep commitment it takes to solve the kind of problems that we're trying to solve today. And that's just three. Like, there's probably 50 more, but I'll tell you this. I think in the end, like, three things are happening in work. One is there's a great reckoning about the part it plays in our lives. There is a new demand for what a great company is going to look and feel like, and flexibility is going to be key. And third, I just think, for all our great work in leadership development and in OD, we didn't prepare leaders for this moment. We don't have really good wartime leaders. We don't have people understand how to take these big, really complex, really giant, crazy challenges and actually stand in a place of both strength and vulnerability, of both courage and like conservatism. We just don't, our leaders weren't ready, and that's on us. Like, I don't think we did our best work in the last decade because we had so much ability to just do fun stuff that we ended up not getting a whole generation of leaders ready for this moment.
So I like what you're saying, but it's interesting. So you're painting a picture that some of the issues that we're having are the pandemic just more exposed them. So you mentioned something about that we're not interested in work-life balance, but work-life harmony. So what does it mean to want work-life harmony versus work-life balance?
I think
And
there's a few things,
what's the
right?
pressure on the organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the past, like, look at you and I early in the 90s, or our parents, right? Work was primary in terms of my pursuit. It defined most of my identity. It was the big reason for my being. I wrapped up everything I am into this job, into this career, into this craft, into this company. I mean, that's everybody's story in the last couple decades. I think what we're seeing today are people are saying, hey, hold on. Like, maybe I should think about the life I want first, what I value, what I care about, how I want to spend my time, because it's finite. And then I should sort of integrate the kind of work I do into making that life real and making it a reality. It's not about passions or, vision boards necessarily and the rest. What it's saying is people are actually putting life ahead of work in their hierarchy of identity, which I think is probably pretty healthy in the end.
Yeah.
But it's causing a lot of problems for companies because all of a sudden they're like, hey, what happened to the productivity I had before? What happened to the I'll come in at 7, I'll leave at 10? Right now, we're having to say, okay, if I'm going to have less of people's creative energy, less of their discretionary effort, how do I create a work system that makes higher impact, higher value out of less time? Right? That's sort of the challenge of the company.
So, like, when I think about our parents' generation, like, it was more like work was like confined. It was you go to work, you come home after 6, there's no access after hours. Vacations were vacations. And then when you and I were coming up in our careers with the advent of Blackberries that eventually turned into iPhones, like 24/7 connectivity, like, I remember my first dial-up getting access, being able to log in at Disney when I was at home, and
Yeah.
now all of a sudden the work hours are like crazy. And some of the things that you're talking about with wanting to put life first, like, that's something like midlife people kind of identify at a certain point, like, hey, what did I do? I gave up my life while I was climbing the ladder. But now it sounds like it's everybody is saying that. Even the younger generations are saying, no, life first, work second. The other thing that you talked about is also like the transparency in recruiting, and what does the transparency of recruiting look like? Especially when you're dealing with trying to create a culture and environment where everything's virtual. Like, how do you create transparency in recruiting, and how do you create some sort of promise around our work environment when everybody's working at home now?
Let me take the first question first because I love it, right? You know, technology often drives innovation in humanity, right? It just does. Like, think about the combustible engine way back when. That is the very reason we are no longer living in the same neighborhood that our parents and our grandparents grew up in. Beautiful sort of ability for us to see the world. but it required us then to think about, how do I establish community in different ways? Right. And we played a lot of catch up over the last few generations there. Same things happen in work right now. Right. Our problem wasn't that our companies were inherently asking more of us. Our companies always ask more of us. Right. I don't know a company in the world that's not going to take everything you're willing to give. Right. But here's the deal, is before the onset of like always on little phones we can put in our purse or our pocket, we were hard to find. Like once we left, we were gone. There's really nothing you could do. And so what we have to realize is that it's not just the company's fault. They've always taken as much as we're willing to give. The thing is now is we have to reestablish how that technology is both utilized by us and can be a net benefit for us. Because for all our complaints about it's 24/7, it's 365 days a week, we also can work from anywhere. Right? There's nothing stopping you and I from shooting this same podcast when I'm, traveling with my wife somewhere and you're, hanging out in Denver, Colorado. Like we can do this anywhere now. That's beautiful. We just haven't sort of gotten a place where we can get the whole thing to be in harmony, which
Right.
takes everybody. So it's just I don't think it's anyone's fault. I get really excited about now it's possible. So how do we catch up to the technology and figure out a way to renew our energy when it's 24/7 always on? We got to figure that out. I think the second piece about recruiting, which is a leap, is I've been enamored by this for a long time. Right? This idea of recruiting process are just first dates. Right? I'm not actually as a candidate coming with my real hair a mess. Here's who I am on a random Tuesday morning. I'm coming with my best version of myself, right? So I'm not really totally authentic about what you're going to get, who I am, how I work, what my life is. I mean, there's a lot of those things we just don't expose. And companies did the same thing, right? I think at some point they say, "Oh my God, no one's going to come here if I tell people what it's really like to live and work in this system." But here's the deal: is if you hire them, they're eventually going to live and work in the system. So why not tell them what it looks like right now? Give them a realistic job preview. They're still going to come. The ones that like that brand of working, they're still going to come. And they're not going to lose all their engagement once they get there and realize what they were promised versus what they got was very different. And it's just a problem I see again and again through the interviews, was this sense of, man, when I applied for this job, they told me it was going to be these 25 things I was going to be doing. They told me it was all these values, all these kinds of leaders, and I got really excited about it and I bit. And then I got there on the first day and I knew immediately. And so almost in every wrong fit situation, Betsy, when I asked the question, when did you know? All of them knew during the interview. They knew
They
there
all,
was something, they knew it was a wrong fit during the interview.
wow.
And I said, so why did you do it? And they're like, because it was a better title, it was a bigger paycheck. I just liked being valued and wanted. And it caused me to cover up, ignore many little pieces of information that told me exactly what I was going to get. So it's also a question of, you know, we don't pay attention to all the data when we're motivated to make a decision. Same with consultants. To bring it back to consultants, like when we want a job, right, we will ignore all the other things that would tell us this is a bad decision for us right now.
Right.
Because once your mind's motivated to make a decision, you end up under confirmation bias, which is the only data you're going to see is the data that allows you to say yes to the client. Even when you might have a vacation planned, or you might have, other responsibilities, you might have too many things going on, you just don't see it. And so you end up getting yourself in a place where, like, I should have never taken that job.